here in YouTube land today on this issue of or episode of Weekly Roll Up. We got Steve Hawkins from UCC, or excuse me, USCC, and Jason Kitamura from the home office here. Steve, good to have you. How you been?
I've been well, Jared. Good to be on with you and Jason.
Great. Yeah. So, it's been there's been a few things that have hit the news. A lot of it seemed to be posturing and that kind of stuff. But as we've talked about things as they come up on the morning buzz, we've had our own opinions thrown around with a lot of our local audience here and the guys who are with us every day and in the comments. But hey, you're boots on the ground over there. And I know we wanted to discuss a few things ranging from safe banking and including banking and dispensary robberies, the Biden clemency of which, we talked about recently. I think it was last Friday we brought it up, but we really wanted to get into, is that leaning towards the next move, or is that just an execution of the low hanging fruit? And then otherwise, New York and New Jersey are on the map there, so those range of topics we're going to be covering. Anything you wanted to jump right into right away, Steve?
No, I look. I think you have a great list, and there's probably a couple other things I'm sure that we're going to touch on before our time is up. So let's dive right in.
Nice, right on. Well, thanks again for joining. And yeah, first things first. We got the status of the safe banking versus the CAOA. Um, we've had a couple recent updates, but one of the more recent ones today was that congressional lawmakers push for marijuana banking at the first conference meeting on the large scale manufacturing bill. So it's the bicameral congressional conference that led today, and you had seven members making a point to raise cannabis as part of the discussion on the American Competes Act. I'm not as familiar with when the deadline for that voting is and all that kind of stuff. Can you fill us in a little bit about the American Competes Act and why they're trying so hard to push this safe banking through on this act?
Sure. So the America Competes Act is about it's a good bipartisan measure around ensuring that there's competitiveness with the United States and the manufacturing sector. And right now, the House version included safe banking as a amendment to that bill. The Senate version does not. Now they've gone to conference, Jared, and conferences in Congress have actually, there used to be over 60 of them a year, and not that long ago, and now it's down to a handful every year. There's always one around defense authorization, and now there's one around this America Competes bill. With that opening session that you talked about, there were again like seven strong voices of supporters of SAFE. On the Democratic side, a large number of the members of conference have gone on record in support of SAFE. So it has a shot within the Competes bill. It could easily be a stripped out. The conference will probably be engaged all through the month of June and probably wrap up its business, by early or mid-July. I think we'll know whether SAFE is staying in or out before then. But I do know it's going to be a full court press, and you have people like Senator Patty Murray, number 3 in leadership, saying, "Look, we need safe banking." She's talked, I think, eloquently about the robberies in her state, and the fact that workers' lives are in danger. So I'm thrilled to see such level of commitment and support, and hopefully, hopefully it'll work, or at least it certainly is raising the conversation in ways that I think are really important.
Right, for sure. And before asking Jason here, one of the things excerpts that we took from this morning on the Buzz was
Mhm.
uh, it was let's see, Representative Blumenauer that was quoted as saying the Safe Banking Act is an issue of public and worker safety. He said it's passed the House 6 times, and I hope we work together to retain it because it's a matter of life and death. And I think, hey,
Yeah.
anytime you bring life and death into it, it's serious, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, we got a lot of problems to solve, obviously, with respect to the cannabis industry. We're not going to solve and get every reform in these remaining weeks of this Congress. But yeah, I mean, I think this, he's absolutely right that this is a matter of public safety and worker safety. Look, no one should be going to work in this country worried about whether they're going to come home to their families, right? And that's where the reality is for some folks right now in the cannabis industry. And, we've seen people shot and killed in Tacoma, Washington. Person recently, I think since the last time I was on the show, someone was shot and killed down in California as well. So this is very, very serious and seems to be on the rise.
Absolutely. Um, you know, Jason, what do you think about this? I mean, ultimately we've got places where there's cash available, and there's a commodity that seems liquidatable for cash. And there's no rules surrounding it on a federal level. What do you think about this America Competes Act and them trying to get this part into the bill?
Well, I mean, the issue is, all up to this point, the banks kind of complain that, it's a volatile market, and there's a lot of risk that comes into play when funding a cannabis company or allowing them to have some sort of checking account at their facility. But when it comes down to people dying, and it's a safety of the employees, but also there's customers that are coming in that could be, that could get in the middle of robbery. Um, just crime is just on the rise, just because of the economy, and anybody that has that much cash is always going to be a target. And if the reason that people are getting killed is simply because I couldn't open a checking account, it seems so ridiculous, especially at this point. And they're seeing that, and I mean they have to understand how ridiculous it is to let people die just for simply the fact that the banks are a little worried that they're going to lose a little money here and there. When a lot of these dispensaries are they have a proven history of being positive, and it's nothing to do with that in the long run. But at the end, it's going to be all about safety. I think that's going to push it through.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, it's something that's very much needed. It's ridiculous over here. People are paying the taxes and boxes of cash still, and doing that kind of thing. I mean, realistically, it does put targets on everyone's back. So to have Representative Blumenauer step up and state it as life and death is something that I think is important in the conversation. So
yeah, no, it's so important. And look, we saw 24 senators this week also sign on a letter. I mean, think about it. You have a quarter of the United States Senate. It's a bipartisan letter. I think 5 or 6 Republicans signed on to it at least. Calling on safe banking to be passed under America Competes. So that's a huge show of support. So hopefully we will get this over the finish line. We need to.
Yeah. Well, we are having some technical difficulties over there with Jason. We're going offline there for a moment, so we're getting that figured out. But yeah, let's hope that there's enough sense there with the life and death issue of it, and realistically, there's enough states that are on this side of it that have legalized it, whether medical or recreational, and it's time to not only protect those people first of all, but for the states to protect the interest in which they've done this for, right? It's like, hey, as much as we would have liked all the medical laws to be just because people who choose this should have access to it medically without any taxes, without anything else, the way that this is getting legalized recreationally allows for the coffers to be filled by coffers, and that's what they're interested in. But they're just interested in the money without protecting the people. So, it's like you said, there's a lot that goes into all these laws, the reversing of prohibition, getting out of this time period, and there's a lot of internal parts that the public doesn't see that have to be reversed and or rewritten and that kind of thing before everything's hunky-dory, as they say. Part of that goes into what we've talked about before, and we've with John on quite a few times, and between us, Steve, and everybody here, it's there's a lot of prisoners still in there for planned-only offenses, and whether you're talking about life or death or quality of life or life being affected because of laws, this is a big one. And Biden, with his clemency and commutations there, took a step. I don't want to throw you too far out there or whatnot, but how big of a step do you think it was versus him just taking the low-hanging fruit based upon people already wearing ankle monitors or whatnot, as the story goes?
I mean, the president gave out some commutations and pardons to a range of folks who had drug convictions, not nonviolent drug convictions. I think we saw 9 or so of those cases were cannabis related. It is a start, right? We know that there are more folks. I think that's at least 1,000, if not more, people who are still serving some federal time for cannabis related offenses. It could be as high as a couple of thousand. And then, of course, you got folks that have cannabis convictions, and it's held them back, and at the state level, definitely. And and what can the federal government do to help the states? And the HOPE Act that Representative Joyce and AOC, a Republican and Democrat, got behind to send some money to the states to help with expungement. I'm hoping, Jared, that bill still gets some serious consideration. Maybe there's a way to connect that to SAFE and deal with two of the, I think, the most vexing things that we have right now, knowing that people are still suffering from records that are impacting the quality of their lives, or they're still in a prison and confinement from old cannabis prohibitionist laws, and dealing as well with people going to work in the new industry and needing to feel safe when they do so.
Right. Yeah. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong. There's, with the MORE Act or the CAOA, there's a lot more to it than just releasing the prisoners, right? I mean, there's more issues and a lot more.
Yeah. There's a lot more to it, right? I mean, but here's the thing, right? And maybe this is me on a Friday afternoon, but I just wish that we had started with something that we could bite off and chew, right? Like, my friend, if we had been looking at an expungement bill and safe banking 18 months ago, it would be done and dusted by now, right?
Right.
But the CAOA has been big and it's huge, and we definitely need a North Star out there, right? Thinking about what kind of regulations we're going to have and all of that at the end of the day. And hopefully in the next session of Congress, there'll be some more traction on all of that. But at this late date, right, in the weeks that are left, the real question is, can we get safe banking done? And if we can do something on expungement or some other aspect of equity, that would be great too.
Sounds a lot more ascertainable. Jason, what do you think about that? Because again, that's why I brought it up, Steve. Exactly what you just said is the MORE Act has so many ins and outs to it, so many other things attached to it. When ultimately the people who are part of this conversation over in our comments, us, the people who are part of the cannabis industry day in and day out, it's literally about the quality of life. It's about the safety of those who need it medically. It's about the people who have been in prison wrongfully for it, and those things could be addressed on those two simple votes.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, from the outside point of view, like when it comes down to these votes, what do you think about that? I am the one with the outside point of view. I've never voted. I've been a felon my whole life. Half my life, I didn't think I could vote. And since the recent elections, I didn't want to get involved in something I wasn't a part of here. So, when it boils down to it, is Jason, you've seen these things through your voting life. This is something as to where the MORE Act involves so much, and then you've got the Safe Banking Act and something as simple as an expungement act that could be attached to this bill. Do you think that, from a voter's point of view, is something that would?
Yeah, I agree with Steve. It's just, it's such a huge step. Is the thing is that there's a lot of moving parts in the entire industry. There's nothing really that's been, aside from like alcohol, there's nothing that's this big of an industry. It's even beyond that, because there's so many applications to it that it gets super complex. And the problem with that is, since it's so complex, you can't make everybody happy, because, if it's not enough, then people complain that it needs more. And if it's too much, then people, it kind of gets locked up, and it just sits there for a while. I agree. It would have been cool if we like had everything kind of laid out in like bite-sized pieces to kind of work our way up. But there would have been a lot of pushback and saying, hey, this is not enough. We need more. If that would have happened as well. But at least something would have been accomplished. The end goal is that we're going to get everything. Everything's going to get passed and everything's going to go through. That's what everybody wants. That's the light at the end of the tunnel. But it's a long tunnel if that's the case. That's really the problem, I think.
Yeah. Steve, do you know anything about the possible expungement bill, or what we can be on the lookout for? Is there a bill number or anything that we can, be on the lookout for, or tell our audience to look for?
I don't know. Sure, I don't know the bill number offhand, but the audience can look at certainly on AOC or Representative Joyce's official website. They're going to have a listing for that number, and maybe one of the viewers will pop it up there. But the important thing, I think, is that bill is soon probably going to get introduced as well in the Senate, and that's good, right? It'll start having some push there, and again, probably better if we had been having these conversations around this, combined effort some time ago, which goes to the question, and maybe we talked about it the last time, Jared. The CAOA bill, the Comprehensive Administration, our Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act. Was going to come out in April. There's talk that it could be August. My sense is it's going to be sooner than August, but it still is an open question. And I think to what Jason said earlier, right? This is very complex and a lot of different moving pieces. And I think even the drafters didn't fully comprehend that until you get into the weeds of it, if you will.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough to stay away from the puns in this industry. It really is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, within that, again, it was being someone who does his best just to report the news. You know, our that's our credo here, is to be as unbiased as possible and that kind of stuff. You know, when we're on these things, we're administering some opinions, you know, and applying some opinion based upon what we've seen out there, what we've read out there, what we're experiencing, boots on the ground, and you know, that's it. With this clemency, in regards to the clemency, and this, I've read everything from fantastic, and I mean even advocates like Weldon Angelos behind it 100%, and a lot of his tweets, and really excited about it. And you know what? It's great because it is a first step. It's just, you know, from the other side of it, it's like, well, how many of these people were already out of prison just wearing ankle bracelets versus how many, you know, and you know, when it comes to cannabis, we're all very it's our personal thing, cannabis. So when it comes down to other nonviolent drug offense uses, we should be just as proud that that happened, regardless of it being a plant only thing, because again, it's a step forward. But yeah, it's I guess the next steps will tell, right? And if we can get something through on this Expungement Act, I mean, they would be aimed a lot more directly at well, would it be aimed directly at cannabis users or nonviolent drug users?
Specifically cannabis users, giving the state some resources, and you know, and I hope, Jared, that the administration continues to see what they can do at the federal level to get anyone serving time federally released. Right? You know, when I was at Benzinga, I think I was there. Since the last show, perhaps, you know, just was talking to two folks who had been, you know, in the, I don't know if they were in the federal system, but they essentially had life terms that they were serving. And, you know, and I know there are folks like that in the federal system. You know, I saw where Weldon Angelos had a good exchange and visit over at the White House. So hopefully somebody over there is listening, and we can begin to see some action there. You know, you know, so many presidents leave to their, you know, last days in office to do commutations and pardons. So, you know, it speaks you know, well of Biden to have done something, you know, when he did, but again, I think it's just the start.
Yeah. Nice. Well, and you know, we've got a couple comments over there. Donkey Limit said this seems to like an issue because it simply highlights the government's hypocrisy, one step at a time or nothing at all. They choose nothing consistently, and really, I guess that's exactly what we're talking about here. Was yeah, breaking it down into something that's more digestible on a piece by piece level, right?
Yeah.
It seems that politicians a lot of the time want that oomph behind their campaigns. You know, it's an all or nothing type thing. So yeah. You know, but hey, you know, we do have some positives going on.
We do.
And within that, we've got some states making firsts, right? And first was New Jersey, and that's been going well since the day after 420. And we're going to talk about that a little bit and what's been going on, because even in the beginning of that, there was New Jersey was like, yeah, everyone can smoke it, even off-duty cops. You know, let's give it to everybody, and people were up in arms about that. But then New York seems like they're really trying to take a thoughtful position on this and learn from what other states have done, and really within their equity programs, within a few other things, and how they're rolling it out, seem to be taking their time with it. So yeah, you know, let's see here. New Jersey. Jason, what do you think about cop smoking pot off duty?
I mean, and then I think we talked about this earlier, is that, you know, realistically, we need some sort of device like a breathalyzer that tells you basically if you're intoxicated. If there was something that was widely accepted and something that everybody could say like, okay, we trust this device, then it would never be an issue. You know, like how far off duty, you know, there's, if you did some edibles and you did it a couple hours ago, you might be feeling it right when you start work, you know what I mean? So it's kind of hard to say, but you know, if you had something that can actually determine if you're, intoxicated or not, right then and there, that could really alleviate a lot of the worry about it. I think that's the biggest thing. It's a complicated thing again, because there's everybody's tolerance is different. Everybody's when things kick in and how things last is different. So there's not like a single like rule that you can have on when that works. And of course, when you're dealing with life and death situations that cops do, you kind of want them to be on their A game for sure. So I think that's the main point.
Right. Well, from the other standpoint, Steve, is there's a lot of people in our community that, based upon the positioning of law enforcement and or government, that, they shouldn't be able to participate in general. What are your thoughts about that as far as consumption and or, I guess we'll keep it at consumption instead of investing in all the other kind of stuff that, our community is concerned with?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be, one of those issues, concerns that's going to be with us, and we'll have to have some resolution. So, take for example, truck drivers, right? And they're subject to, urine analysis, and there's plenty of folks who have been denied the ability to be a trucker because of a urine sample that, as we all know, right, could be showing cannabis, traces of THC 30, 40 days after the event. So, so some of the conversation is moving around, will oral fluid tests, basically saliva, be something that at least gets you in a 6 to 8 hour ballpark of THC use, right? Doesn't mean that if you took a couple of hits on a joint, to Jason's point, if you did that 6 hours earlier, is it going to impair you going to start the job? That may depend upon tolerance levels and all that. But at least for a truck driver, it would be better to have a saliva test, or for an officer who, had a good time Saturday night, and used cannabis recreationally, but come Monday morning, it's not going to be an issue in his or her system on a saliva test, right? So, so there are things that I think we need to be thinking about there. I mean, the reality, I guess, right, is that if you ate a gummy right before you came into work, right, it may not show up. I mean, I don't know enough about how quickly things emerge, right? But these issues around impairment need to be, I think, thought through more carefully. I think the urine test is clearly just a blunt instrument that doesn't do much, except hurt a lot of people. And I think we're going to see these efforts around oral fluid testing. I think there's some incredible work being done now in terms of thinking about impairment testing in general. And I think on the horizon, we might begin to see smart technology. I was talking with the folks over at Kazoo and Witty, the new company coming online, and looking at how you can develop essentially a smart vape pen, right? That Jared, you begin to know what your levels are for THC and CBD and CBN in this particular product. You can register. Did that take you close to the line, over the line, right? Depending upon your need. And you'll be able to save that and download it in a smartphone app, right? Just like if it was Java or something like that. That's where this can be going, right? And it's and that's going to be a level of like understanding around consumption and consumer data. Because guess what, right? Like I know I have friends, who will say, I tried cannabis and I was just, it was too much, right? They don't discern and say, I tried company X's product and it was too much and I'm never going to buy again. They're just, people are turning off some people from the entire industry because they had a too high a dose or something like that.
Right.
Or, friends passing around a vape pen, and this is the last thing to say on it, I take a hit off of your vape pen, you may have something that's only 2% or 3%, THC level. Somebody else has something higher. So there's a lot of ways that consumers are taking in cannabis that is that I think we're going to see some interesting changes in the industry, which then will impact policy and begin to help us answer some of these questions.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm just hoping that the whole idea of it isn't kind of like, like when your kids are doing something that they'll probably get hurt. Sometimes instead of telling them, hey, don't do it, you just say, hey, let them do it, let them learn his lesson. I'm hoping that's not the issue, because the first time there's some sort of bad thing that happens in the law enforcement, and then they test them and say, oh, he tested positive for cannabis because we let them do it, then obviously then that's going to be the axe and say like, okay, well, new policy, nobody can use it ever, and then it's like, oh, well, we'll copy them. They were the example that they tried it and it didn't work. We don't, hopefully that's not the case of what's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and Steve, as you were alluding to, there's different use cases here. When you're talking about public safety and law enforcement, you're talking about someone who, is arguably as dangerous as somebody out here on the freeway, right? It's driving a car, you can kill someone, but this is public safety. This is who you turn to be prepared for the situation, right? And when it comes down to that, certain federal jobs and driving big rigs or public safety, I do believe that within federal regulation, decriminalization or legalization, it is going to come with National Highway Institute regulatories, just as what came with blood alcohol content. They'll find something essentially that will, first off, for public safety workers and for people who drive trucks and do that kind of thing, find where they can say that they were driving under the influence under a certain period of time. It's going to be a minute, and they're working on it every day because how popular cannabis is, but it's going to be a minute before there's a defensible position on driving under the influence for Joe Public, in my opinion, right? Is for years to come, there's going to be attorneys that will be able to get people off on, let's call it the equivalent of a wet and reckless or an open container or something like that, because essentially the technology it's going to be tough to have a defensible proven position based upon what they come. I've heard something as far as spraying scanners on the side of a highway.
There's
So really, I think the testing and the two issues that came up with New Jersey was the fact that, number one, is law enforcement, and they've been putting people away for this. Why should they get the luxury of being able to participate in it? That was one from the community. But the other was, hey, you know what? I depend on law enforcement for my safety. If I call them, I don't want them being stoned when they come to work or hungover for being stoned, because again, people don't understand the level of hangover or how it impairs the next day or whatnot. And really, again, it's more of, like you said, to each their own and what they're smoking and the vehicle that they choose to take, right? There's a lot of that hangover.
Yeah. And, people, God knows there are folks who, there are probably individuals who have a fair amount of vodka that can, unmask the fact that they've been drinking on the job. So, there's always going to be issues in this regard. But I think, to your point, I think, Jared, how we get smart around it and find a way that people can recreate, including police officers, right, when they're off duty, in ways that aren't going to be, costing people an opportunity to have a career in law enforcement.
Right. Well, and from that career to the next career, we can jump on over to New York real quick. And, we're talking about a few of the things they're doing to prepare for the opening of the market. As soon as they dropped the rules, they ran over a couple of those horses, so to speak, because all of a sudden they had people out there at bodegas and at the chess spots and the parks and that kind of stuff, just wheeling and dealing, cannabis like it was free will out there. And then they had to shut that down. But really, they're starting to I think, take a page out of California's books, and they're only licensing so many growers at a certain time. They've got an equity program that basically focuses on who was uh, affected by wrongful
Right.
arrests and their kids, right? And that's what I like
Right.
about that next, is because essentially it focuses on people who were convicted, nothing else.
Mhm.
People who were convicted, and then their kids, because you know what? People who went through this and had their lives changed by it, it affected their kids 100%. And that
Mhm.
one came out of the blue for me. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, that's, that's awesome, because by
Yeah.
the numbers, there's kids out there. By the numbers, kids are affected by it, and negatively by the numbers.
Yeah, no,
That's it.
yep, yep. No, that's great. Part of good restorative justice work. When I did criminal defense work and we got some folks out who were falsely imprisoned, that was one of the deals that we cut. Jared was like, if it's too late for you to go to college, we made it like part of the deal was the state would offer free tuition to somebody's kids, right? Because
Right,
to your point, families suffer, right? So,
right.
yeah,
Oh yeah, it's a mentality. You wear it for your whole life.
yeah.
Speaking about it earlier in today's buzz, it was cognitive dissonance, right? Where you
Mhm.
grow up understanding one thing, and then life's another way, and yeah, you got to relearn it. And that's a lot of us in the cannabis industry are doing that. And it's tough for kids to recover from thinking their mom or dad's a bad person because they're in jail because of drugs, and then ultimately, wait, this is legal. People
Mhm.
are making money off of it. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that
Hmm.
has to be figured out, because a lot of people went through wrongful imprisonment, harsher penalties than were ever needed, and they're still serving out time. So it's good to see some of these things being thought about. But within
Mhm.
the state, having having the horses in front of the cart theory hasn't been something that seems to be uh, working out for most states, right? In this particular instance, I feel like New York is putting out a lot of stuff that makes a lot of sense. What do you think about New
Yeah.
York?
Oh, I think that they're on to some really good innovations, right? So the fact that under New York State law, they're able to put money into helping, with their equity. Folks who will ultimately get equity licenses to have some built out businesses will be, you know, amazing, right? Because that's at least saving on some beginning operating costs. Hopefully, we'll be able to match that with the ability to bank, and uh, and then folks will really have some opportunities. Another state that I'm keeping an eye on, Jared, is Delaware, right?
Hmm.
Where and it's weird, just so folks know, in Delaware, uh, anything that has to do with businesses being taxed has to pass both the House and the Senate in Delaware by 60%. And the argument was made for years, Jared. Well, we're talking about cannabis being a new business, not an existing business, but still that 60% rule applied.
Hmm.
So talking about like not trying to get everything at once, they split the bill now so that the decriminalization of cannabis, anybody, it will no longer be a criminal offense to have in possession and to use recreationally up to an ounce, right?
Right.
And so that now it's headed to Governor Carney's desk. He is no fan of cannabis, right? But um, and I've had one conversation with him last year. But look, if he signs it, there's there's a national shadow there because that's President Biden's home state, right?
Right.
So here Biden, as president, made his campaign promise that he would decriminalize cannabis. His home state will have beaten him to the punch, right?
Wow.
you know. So we need to keep an eye on what happens in Delaware because we got to turn, and if they do criminalize, it really begins to beg the question: what is Biden going to do now that his own home state is acted? So,
That's a big deal.
yeah.
Well, and then the next thing after this particular midterm election here is we have the end of end of Biden's term coming up, and ultimately, if certain actions aren't taken on behalf of cannabis, I mean, ultimately, this makes cannabis an election issue for the next election, and anyone who runs on it and embraces it stands, in my opinion, that much better of a chance of actually, getting something going, especially if it's a close race, because this is publicly supported by most Americans now, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't know how that presidential race will shape up, but before that, right? And I think I said it on the show last time, right? I'm I'm interested in seeing even look as we see new people come to Congress. There's going to be a generational shift, right? The fact that Nancy Mace, for example, Jared, Nancy's, you know, young, yes, conservative, right? But that's exactly what I think we're going to see. We're going to see a younger generation, both sides of the aisle, right, coming into Congress with very different views on cannabis than some of the older folks. So take
Right.
Senator Dick Durbin, right? He
Mhm.
Senator of Illinois, senior senator. He's like Biden on cannabis, right? He kind of sort of reluctantly supports the industry, but he's no huge fan, right? But we're going to see, you know, and I may be proven wrong on this, but I think we're going to see a younger, as we see the generational flip going on in Congress, we're going to see support from places that we didn't think we were going to see it. So if you and I were talking 2 years ago, and I said, hey, you know what? There's going to be a Republican elected in a state that doesn't even have medical, and they're going to be
Right.
a champion for decent for a decrim for end of federal prohibition. You would have you would have bet against that, right?
Right.
So that's an example, right, of I think
Absolutely.
where we're headed.
And Wicked Smart points out that he thinks her bill's better than Chuck's bill. We'll leave it at that. But there's some things, and right off the bat, the tax situation would be one that it's like, hey, that's a no-brainer. But the inner workings of these bills, that's what you got to look out for, the small print, and especially near the ending of those passages. So that's why it's so important on these midterms to pay attention to who's voting for what, who's pushing for what in your state, on your locals, and make sure you get the ones in there that you want, because they're the ones ultimately making the next moves for us, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see, what else do we have? We were talking about New York, and we got through New Jersey. That about wraps it up for our points of topic here. You got anything happening over in your neck of the woods? I know we just got through Hall of Flowers, and before that, you saw John out at Benzinga. I saw him out Hall of Flowers. I get to see him this weekend at what is that called? The Green Street Festival over in LA there.
Yeah. I may go up to MJ on Unpack next week. I'm going to go be on a town hall with the Coalition for Black Trade Unionists in Los Angeles in a couple of weeks. I should swing on down to visit you, Jared. But
Absolutely.
yeah, but that's good. Just I think it's a sign, right, that we're getting invited to new spaces because so 1 week it's an investors conference. The next week it's Black trade unionists who are very interested in ways to be further involved as workers in the growing industry, right? So that's a great sign of where we are.
Absolutely. Right on. Well, we had a lot of comments, and a lot of people in the comments. We reached over a couple hundred comments today. So I want to say thank you to everybody. for joining in the discussion and staying along with us on that kind of thing. Last week, Jason and I were talking a little bit about the releasing of the app we've got coming up here. June 27th we've got going on, and as always, I forgot to hit everybody up for the like, share, and subscribe, because this is cannabis and we aren't on a cannabis platform, so sometimes it's tough to discover us. Sometimes we get our content restricted. Basically, I've had to appeal every one of our last videos because of the fact that somebody out there doesn't like the content and they're restricting our content. So we appeal. We ultimately win because this is a news channel. We're out here educating. We're doing that. We're not selling anything. Opposite of that, we like cannabis and we're part of that movement. I think all of us can agree on that one there. But when it comes down to it, is we do have that app going, and we are beyond a cannabis friendly platform. We are cannabis. We are a cannabis platform, and really continuing the discussion in a way that we don't have to look over our shoulders. We've got a whole bunch of industry highlights. We aggregate the news. We've got news from all over the different states and the different parts of the country, so that it's a worldly thing on our app there. And if you want to join the conversation, as always, anyone from this channel, you can find the link in our description, either on this video or at the front of our channel there. Or come January 27th, we're going to open this thing up to the world. You guys are getting the first word on that here. I think I just I don't know if I told that too early or not. Put out a PR release here shortly. Jason's over there. Like, you weren't supposed to say that. So anyway, we're going public here shortly, and we're going to be letting everybody in. But really, we've got some great conversations going on there, from sharing everything from plant photos to recipes and questions being answered and asked all the time. So please like and subscribe here, but don't be afraid to join the app. It's a TRICHOMES Community app, and there's a lot of fun stuff going on between now and June 27th. But as always, the second week and Friday, we dedicate this to learning more about the federal fight and learning about this with somebody. Again, Steve Hawkins is someone who's been fighting this fight for quite some time, first with the Marijuana Policy Project, and then on as the CEO of the U.S. Cannabis Coalition, right?
U.S.
Council.
Cannabis, right?
Sorry, U.S. Cannabis Council. And they're at the forefront of this conversation, and you'll see in articles ranging from Forbes to Business Insider to anything else. I think The Hill recently just had you quoted on that as well. So thanks a lot for spending the time, Steve. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
No, it's always great to be on, Jared, and I look forward to what we will talk about in a month's time, and I suspect a lot's going to happen. So it'll be good.
Well, do me a favor and stoke the fire over there in Capitol Hill, and give us something to talk about. Yeah.
All right. Got it.
All right. Well, hey, thanks a lot, Jason.
Thank you.
You have a good one, sir. I'll see you as you walk out of the room over there. And Steve, have a great weekend. Everyone else out there, be safe, be well. Have a great weekend, guys. Thanks.
Take care all.
All right, guys.